Hello marketers, Ty here bringing you another episode of Lean Mean Marketing Teams. In today's episode we're joined by Fabian Marrone, CMO of Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. Fabian has a decorated global marketing career and was awarded the CMO of the Year by the Australian Marketing Institute in 2019. In today's episode you'll discover how Fabian has successfully led a marketing transformation journey underpinned by three pillars of data, digital and differentiation, and subsequently how he went about building the capability of his team in these three critical domains. We'll also unpack how Fabian has designed a team that is built around a process rather than a formal team structure, and how he's developed a test and learn culture in the team. Fabian also reveals two capabilities that marketing leaders must harness right now to be effective in the current climate. So if you're looking to build the capability of your team in data, digital and differentiation, and you want to become a better leader, then you'll definitely want to listen to this episode. And if you haven't already yet, please subscribe to the show so you can keep getting all the tips and strategies you need to build a high-performance marketing team.
Welcome to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes, where you'll hear from leading CMOs and thought leaders about what it takes to create a high-performance marketing team. This podcast is brought to you by Growth Generators, a consulting firm that helps CMOs design and build modern marketing teams that drive growth. If you need help optimizing your marketing team, head to growthgenerators.io. Now, let's get on to the show.
Okay, welcome Fabian Marrone, CMO of Monash University over in Melbourne, Australia, to the Lean Mean Marketing Teams podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we met a while ago, a few years ago. I think you were at Hobson's while I was CMO at Curtin University. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yes, had some working relationship at that point in time.
Yeah, it's been good to stay in touch and a pleasure to have you on the show. You've had an incredible global marketing career. Do you remember the time when you first decided that marketing was going to be your career path, and then building on that, can you give us a brief overview of your career today?
Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily as much of a conscious decision or it was more organic. I was a little bit of a wheeler and dealer as a youngster, business entrepreneur, trying to create any product to make a buck, usually selling to family members.
Yeah.
I liked my mixed lollies at that time.
Nice.
And my dad is a real business entrepreneur who has grown a really large, successful national business. So I think I got that interest from a business perspective there, but probably wasn't until high school doing the old business studies that I really started to find the part that I enjoyed the most was the marketing comms component of things. So that's really where it started, a little spark, I would say, but there was no point in time that I said I'm going to be a marketer, and that was probably reflected in my university choices. So I kind of had a scattered mix of marketer, teacher, and a few other things in there. But I got into I did a double in admin and marketing and HR and PR. So I did a bit of a mix in Uni SA, and then post that, I went on to work for a really small consulting company who was moving into a tech company in South Australia. So started with about 10 people, and it grew exponentially in my time there. So I was with them for about 7 years, and that role took me all around Australia at the time, doing consulting, technology implementation, as well as marketing and comms, event management. You basically have a hand in everything when you're in a small business. And then it grew, and we had an offshore in Sri Lanka. So I started going to Sri Lanka and having a team there, and then opened an office in the UK, and I went over to manage that, and opened an office in Canada, and I managed both across the pond, different ponds than the one we're around. But I'd gotten in kind of that organic motion and turned more into business development, and I thought that I'd probably skipped that mentoring ship of a really senior marketer, and being in London, you're presented with a lot of opportunities for really great, successful leadership in that space. So I decided to take a change and actually take a step back from an executive management role to a marketing manager role at the Adecco Group, looking after IT and engineering. And that was really fascinating. The world's largest HR organization, looking after a lot of tech and engineering brands. And it was a really good place to start the core branding component of my craft and develop propositions from scratch and brand refreshes and implement and integrate brands from the US and really get some different training in social media and digital marketing. And I did my postgrad over in London at that time through IDM, and I went over to Sweden to do Hyper Island in social media and things like that. So got a really good grasp and really took on the PR component and comms part. But then it was time to head back to Oz, and through a project at the Adecco Group, I got a real interest in the education sector. So I wanted to come back and work within that. And an opportunity was presented in the form of Hobson's, who worked really from K-12 right through to tertiary education globally. So I jumped on board to be their VP of marketing at that stage, and came back and housed in Melbourne. So did that for a few years, and then took on business development in Australia as well, and looked after a marketing team in Malaysia. So got some exposure there, and then also back in the UK. So kind of full circle again, had a team in the UK and looked after the data and analytics piece too, which is keen interest in mine, as well as the digital and brand. Then there was an opportunity to take Hobson's enrollment management services business over to the US to be part of their product spread. So I went over to do that. That only lasted a short period of time. It wasn't the right time in the market for international education, and I'll leave the viewers to understand why, but that was around the time of the last election. And so after traveling South America, then turned around and came back to home, Australia, but a different home in Melbourne, and started with Monash.
Wow. Incredible journey, and you can see how that, I guess, the first role in the startup must have given you such breadth of experience, both in the consulting and the technology, and then the path from there, just UK and managing different countries and rolling out, it's been a perfect training ground, I guess, for your role today.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually gone full circle, because I've returned to the board now of that company that I first started as a grad in. And, you're right. I'd be on the road doing business development, doing SQL updates to technology products whilst marketing it, whilst consulting, and, learning HR and finance and how to sell and pre-sale. So, not a better possible stomping ground. And, pretty lucky and fortunate to be in that position.
Yeah. So I've always been of the belief to kind of go broad first and then maybe go narrow later. And I think you pick up so many different skills, and you find out what you like and don't like, and can harness all that down in your career. So back in Monash now, for the audience's benefit, can you just give us a quick overview of Monash University?
Yeah, so Monash University is Australia's largest university. We are located in 4 campuses across Australia, but I'd probably define us as the most global university almost in the world, because we have a footprint in Malaysia and in Suzhou and in India, and soon to be Indonesia. So a very global university, very large university, a clear proposition to the domestic market in terms of undergraduate, but a highly focused PhD and postgraduate suite of products, as well as being a top 100 research intensive university. So for those who know the university sector, it's very unusual to have such scale and breadth in education offerings and such highly ranked institution in research at the same time. So it's a very different makeup than a lot of other universities, which makes it a complex model, but an absolutely awesome place to work with strong ambition and a clear road to get there.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And you've been busy in your almost 3 years, or a little over 3 years since you joined, and in that time you've been recognised as the AMI, Australian Marketing Institute, CMO of the Year in 29, and made it into the CMO 50, which is the top 50 marketers in Australia, in 2019 as well, as a result of a lot of the transformation you've led. So can you talk to us a bit about that journey you've been on and the transformation you've been driving within the marketing comms function at Monash?
Yeah, I think that the transformation, for me, it feels gradual. That might just be the type of person that I am. But, as you said, it's been 3.5 years. And I guess it started with really the core principles of marketing and going in and me understanding what the value proposition of Monash was and how that was different from everyone else. And going through that process, which took about 6 months to really sit there and listen to the very large organization and understand that, and then replay that to the organization. And then once I had that value proposition, which connects to our strategy, it was really easy to see the direction in which Monash needed to go in terms of marketing and communications. Monash is a really roll up your sleeves type of institution, and it's still very young in terms of university years. So it was a clear proposition and a pretty clear understanding in my mind about how we needed to achieve that proposition.
What was that proposition?
Well, so as you do in an interview process, you go in and you talk about what you might do, and you have these ideas, and you also are called in on a remit. And it was really about bringing data and digital and differentiation to that marketing and communication strategy. So they were the three things I focused on in going forward with the role. And then that was the outcome really that came underneath it. The value proposition was more about, restating what the university's role was in society and globally, and what a university's role was in society and globally. So that's the thought leadership piece. But underneath that, being the modern institution that it is, it was also about modernizing how we engage with our audiences, and how we do that in a digital first approach, but how we then use data in that digital first approach to then decide what's the next best interaction. It's also appreciating that an audience member of an institution that has a community of, greater than 500,000, people are going to cross over everywhere. So there is no one audience communication. It's about the cross interaction between those audiences, which were important. And again, that data and digital model. But running that, I guess, and I'll refrain from calling it a digital transformation model, but running that project that we call With Monash, building a bigger community who's more engaged, in parallel to telling the world what Monash was about, linked to that value proposition. So building up a really solid suite of content assets which went beyond a TVC, which dig deep into an editorial outfit that sits within my area, that went into really informed content like podcast series, like documentaries, like short form and long form, and also realizing that Monash is global, and that a message that is right in Australia and issues that are relevant in Australia are not necessarily relevant all over the world. So customizing that content stack and having tentacles out, I guess, internationally to communicate to those audiences. So that's kind of the underpinning narrative of what the initial roadmap was like.
Beautiful. And having worked in universities for a long time, I know that getting that alignment around data and digital and building that, holistic kind of strategy requires a lot of different parts of university to work together, and universities can traditionally be quite siloed. What were the keys to success to getting, I guess, the executive buy-in and then the alignment from different teams that you needed as part of that journey to, build the tech stack and build the segmentation models and drive that whole strategy?
Look, I still think there's that process doesn't finish once you start or commence, as you would know. It's a continuous evolution of how you improve alignment, engagement, and relationships. And those relationships change because people move over time. So that's a process we engage in every year formally, but we also have a structure which supports that connectivity because of our co-centralized, co-decentralized model, which I can talk about a bit later. But the leadership piece was, I don't want to say it was easy, but there weren't the barriers that many would think, because I'd come in with a pretty clear, I think, remit. I'd come in with a pretty clear idea of what I needed to and was there to achieve. And the piece that was the question mark was the value proposition, which for Monash was probably the easiest I've ever had to develop, is because everyone kind of said the same things when talking, running those workshops. It was, there was a finessing of words as you do, but everyone was on the same page in where the institution was going. So that getting people across the line and the buy-in was more about telling the story back to them and saying how we would deliver that to audiences, and then what we at that point would see the results being, because we had different degrees of capturing of data and reporting at that stage. So it was a bit theoretical in the improvement, and based on experience and judgment.
Yeah, brilliant. And for those that haven't seen it, the campaign is predicated on this change kind of mantra, isn't it? Can you talk very briefly about that, the positioning or the platform that it's predicated on?
Yeah, I think the Change It campaign, and more of it's an organizing thought, I guess, because we haven't moved from that, and that's not our intention. We will keep adding as we have. But Change It was really about across generations and across scope, we see a lot of commentary and a lot of vehicles in the way people think that change should be made, and how you get about positive change, whether that's through protest or whether that's through commenting on social media. The university is very clear that the way that we believe you create real change is through education and research, and also by disseminating thought leadership for general public consumption, so they remain informed and we deliver on our civic duty. So it was about telling people to kind of move beyond and behind the screen. Unfortunately, we can't necessarily these days move beyond our screens, but it is about going and doing something about contributing to the change. Now that might be changing your circumstance in your own personal life, or that might be changing the world in terms of climate change or violence against women or modern slavery or whatever those key pillars were. So it was a call to action, and it remains a call to action. There's a lot of advertising or campaigns that use the word change, but that scope of change was really important, and that rationale for change and what actually constitutes real change is really important to us.
Brilliant. Thanks for that context. Now, I'd love to get into the team and the transformation you've been driving there. So you talked a little bit about the model very briefly then, but can you unpack, I guess, the current maybe overall team size and structure and what reports into you and how that's maybe changed over time?
Yeah, look, the team... the size of the team ranges a little bit, and that's because of strategic projects and initiatives, but it's around that 100 mark, and it focuses on marketing and communications. So I have a narrative. We don't have a structure. We have a workflow, and that workflow is a data marketing infrastructure unit at the front, which looks at all of the data to inform our campaigns, our marketing decisions, our channels, etc. That then works with a planning and alignment team who take the strategy I articulated earlier and integrates that with the wider institution and make sure that's online and what we're amplifying is aligned to the goals of each individual area. We then have a content and channels unit, which is kind of your organic marketing, which is your marketing and communications, which is social media, our video, web digital, media, PR, and editorial. We have our own newsroom. And then we have an audience marketing and demand generation unit, which is your paid marketing and large brand campaigns. So getting eyeballs on content and conversion, and also looking at the international piece as well as the domestic. And then underneath, we have a really small kind of performance unit, which just makes sure that we're mapping our capability, our capacity to the actual strategic pieces and make sure that we're online and in line there. And we kind of fall under two buckets. It's about building reputation and managing reputation, or around conversion. And conversion isn't, future student conversion. It's conversion across every audience group, whatever that looks like. So greater engagement with alumni, or greater student participation with students, etc. So they're the key kind of areas and components that I look after.
Brilliant. And how has that changed? Which capabilities have you built up since you came in, and what did the model look like when you joined?
Yeah, I guess the structure of strategic marketing communications, which is what the area I look after is called, the focus was very different prior, and they were going through a brand refresh with the previous CMO. So a lot of it was focused on strategic brand planning, and a lot of design and web rollout was the core pieces. thankfully, when I'd got there, that piece had then matured, and we were able to have the discussion more around, okay, now that we've got an infrastructure in terms of brand infrastructure and hierarchy, whilst we needed to refresh the proposition, the elements were there. Now it can be more about how are we different in the articulation of that, and how do we start to communicate with people in a modern way through automation, personalization, and the appropriate tech stack, and how do we integrate data. So I guess the capability uplift was the same as the intention when I came. We uplifted people's capability in terms of the data literacy, but also the use of data in terms of defining or their role in defining a marketing campaign, and then reporting back. But then also in terms of the differentiation, getting people really focused on what makes Monash different, and that kind of strategic brand piece played really heavily. And then digital played a large role, and digital's so broad, but it was basically bringing everyone up to a digital speed and dispersing digital out of one area and into many, and dispersing design out of one area and into many. So they don't become a cog in a process, they become part of that initial foundation idea.
Brilliant.
So they were the kind of core pieces.
Yeah. And was that done through a mix of, buying in, I guess, new talent that had some of those skills, as well as training and using the resources you had, or agency partners, or how did you do that upskilling, I guess, in the digital data and differentiation?
Yeah, we did a few things. So I brought in a few experts to kind of challenge my thinking when I first got there, from a number of very large, either global or local organizations outside of higher education, to say, would this model stack up in the private sector or in other sectors, and how would you go about filling these gaps in a new structural world? And I worked with a few of those people to design certain roles, and those roles were filled by a combination of already existing people and some new people in, and then we've run a number of core programs in terms of either whether it's been associated with technology, upskilling in that way, or just a flipping of thinking from print design to digital first design, or whether it's been formalized training programs and putting people in touch with different kind of events and conferences and training programs. So a mix of many things. And part of the training, I guess, that we do is just you run a project and people get the best experience on that project, and that kind of ability to try out your skills in an area is a pretty good way to find out if you're right for it.
I'm a big believer in the 70-20-10 development model, if you've heard of that, where 10% off the job, 20% near the job, and 70% on the job. And that is those projects where you actually get your hands dirty and get to use new skills, which is always most powerful. But then the 20% maybe using the in-house staff that you've got or other experts to train, and the 10% is bringing in other like more formal learning and training. It sounds like you've definitely used that combination. What did you have to change in terms of what you outsourced and insourced as a result of this?
So look, we have really close partnerships, as many organizations do, where we're supported in rolling out, I guess, of our campaigns or initiatives, particularly in international markets. We're supported very well by a number of specialist agencies who can help us translate our brand, not just in language, but in terms of what it will mean locally. That is a very different model, but it's one that we value very highly. We obviously rely on our creative agency to work and bring to life our value proposition and to challenge us in that strategic sense. And I think that's probably moved more to the strategic sense rather than the campaign. The team has taken a lot more of that campaign piece internally. And we've relied on tech partners in Salesforce, because we're large users of that, and have been for a long time. So they certainly facilitated that piece. And along the way, we've brought in some Agile coach expertise and other pieces through that process, and short-term contractors from different environments that are looking, they bring in a whole load of expertise for a short period of time, build that capability in, and then move on because that's their style of work that they like. That's brought us a lot of value, and particularly in areas like comms, which universities now are expected to comment on a whole range of things. Probably 10 years ago they weren't, and have a different presence. So bringing in people that have had experience in different comms areas has been really valuable throughout that period as well.
Beautiful. And on the global models, and you mentioned, a number of different kind of campuses and partnerships. I think it's fascinating how a lot of those partnerships work with universities, with either education partners or agencies, either white labelled or your own staff over there. How does it work with the team on the ground? Like, how do you maintain the connection? I know you've said you use agencies to kind of make sure the message is localised, but do you actually have staff that report into you, or is it just more a working relationship with those agencies?
No, more of a working relationship with those agencies for marketing and communication specifically, but they also have parallel contacts in Australia, so or their location, whether it be Malaysia or Australia. So that works really well. They work around the same times. They also are looking, and on the same platforms. And
I've noticed you talk about like a test and learn, fail fast culture, and agile and adaptable team with the new structure. How did you get leadership support for that, I guess, and how have you built that mindset and that capability in the team?
When I came on, there was working models already in the institution of successful Agile within our eSolutions area and Monash Connect. Lucky in that sense that there was already some examples of working models. So we took the best pieces of that and we engaged with people in those areas and who was supporting them. But also I'd had experience in implementing Agile previously in a couple of organizations. So I had a clear idea. But, one of Vicinity, who runs a lot of the large shopping centers in Australia, I was lucky enough to go there, and that their Agile program was led initially by their equivalent of a CMO. So it had a real marketing flavor, and the agency that they had worked with, or the group that they had worked with, had a really good understanding about Agile in a marketing environment is very different than it is in, technology. It's about release dates of product. In marketing, it's about campaigns where sometimes days can be a little bit more flexible, or creative can be a bit more flexible. So, we took on board learnings from other organizations, but also had a pretty clear idea about how that would work. It's changed probably, 4 times in 3 years in how we use it. We've moved to something called activity-based working, our definition of it, which is, a kind of person leading an activity group, which is made up cross-functionally to deliver on something, and then they disband. And then we've still kept some of the more traditional Agile components in some of the team management. So we've taken the best of a whole load of pieces and just developed our own way of working, which I think you have to, one methodology does not work.
No, that's it. I think making it work for marketing and modifying and, testing and learning and trying the right framework is always the best way.
Exactly. But it gives the opportunity, on the test and learn and the fail fast piece. That's more, I guess, about an ethos of the team. It's about, it was probably more pronounced in the first year and a half. It was about what's the idea, what's the, how's that going to shift the dial, or whatever dial that may be. Okay, try it, in an incubated capacity, and then let's see if it works and roll it out. So it's kind of more that traditional innovation incubator kind of style. Now it's more moved to these activity-based working groups saying, this is the intention, and from a customer experience perspective, this is how it will improve the experience. And from a conversion or reputation perspective, this is how it will move the dial there. We now have the dialogue, and then that becomes either a priority project under a program of work, or it doesn't. So it's probably more organic now in terms of it's ingrained in the ethos and the way we do things, and we don't notice that we're doing it, which is good. But it's formalized in the fact that it fits within a project, which fits within a program of work, which links back to the university strategy. So it's more, integrated in that way. And it's also the other flip side is about people making decisions where decisions need to be made, and not pushing decisions around or up, and giving people the ability to define, look, you're completely fine to make these decisions in that in that space, and don't need further input. And that sometimes doesn't work, and sometimes we make wrong decisions. But I wouldn't say that we've ever made a decision that's altered the approach.
No. And it builds autonomy for the team, doesn't it? Which drives empowerment and engagement, and
it does,
and performance, and it streamlines the whole process. You're getting stuff out the door quicker rather than everything needing, because universities can again be quite bureaucratic and hierarchical, and you can fall into the trap of this level needs to approve this and what's this process. But I think mapping out the process like you've done, and almost I love the way you talk about more a way of working than a team structure, and it makes total sense starting with the data and the insights, and then the planning, and then kind of the execution, and on from there. It sounds quite an innovative model that makes perfect sense. So.
Yeah, I think it's something that is just evolves, and look, it's got it hits road bumps, as I've suggested, and I think it's about not throwing everything out. It's about having faith that the model is actually delivering, and having the data to say that it delivers. But also knowing when you need to say, look, that needs refinement, because it's not working. And anyone to say that you can have stable ways of working in an environment like we're in today, it's just not going to happen. Our audiences change every year as new cohorts come in, as new cohorts graduate and become alumni. We need to change with them, because they have different expectations. So we can't be still, and I don't think anyone else can afford to be at the moment.
No. And have there been many failures, or I think that's the other part of it, is saying, failures are learnings or lessons, and it's okay if we stumble on the way. Have there been many that have come up, but have you learned from them as a result of this?
Look, I think we all make individual judgment calls, and we all make hundreds and hundreds and thousands of decisions each day. And sometimes when you talk about decentralization of decision making, people make different and incorrect judgment calls. So things that should have probably gone for sign off, won't, or things that don't. And I think they are learnings. I think there's also, when you're moving to vary from traditional ways of communication to everything being digital, you're going to have road bumps. Whether that's timed social media posts going at the wrong time, or whether that's emails that go out automatically, or there's a whole range of things, and SMSs is a whole bunch of stuff, and we've all seen plenty of that over time. But again, they've all been really minor because things have caught them in the process, and I think that's the important piece. So there's been learnings in terms of process enhancement, but there has not been anything that would at all compromise as I said, the course of action or the brand or anything like that.
Brilliant. And one last question around the team structure and the engagement and the ways of working is, the engagement with the faculties and schools is always critical, making sure that the team is as embedded as possible. How have you done that? Have you found any key roles that interact with the faculties or schools that are pivotal and bring that knowledge back into the marketing team?
Yeah, so as I said at the beginning, which I probably didn't go into the detail of the faculty structures, is that we have a co-delivery model, strategic marketing and communications function, and then in the faculties there is a marketing manager or a marketing engagement individual or manager, and they will typically focus on that product type marketing, whether that be education or whether that be research content. That is a key liaison point between our planning and alignment function, and a very frequent communication cadence, and then also they will have differing structures of individuals underneath them depending on their size and what their specialization is. So they may have some digital and web and really specialized people as well, depending on what infrastructure they're supporting, and that's our connection is through that marketing manager team, and obviously relationships within those areas. And then, we align where it is important to align. So as as a brand, you're going to push out as much as you can. You can't push out everything. But then as you go into each faculty, then they will have, a whole different raft of content. So it's just about alignment. And again, you have with any alignment in a model like this, you're going to have times where, a brochure's printed and it might not be completely on brand. Okay. Or, an email goes out and it's not completely, and, they are important to make sure that they are rectified. But we haven't seen whole campaigns or anything like that. There's a really collegial and collaborative group of marketing communications professionals and experts working in a connected way and all trying to do things which are linked to the same KPIs and know their racy, basically, their lane, which is really important.
Excellent. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I've noticed through our discussions, and I've seen that you believe that, and I do too, that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness for a leader. It kind of takes some maturity to take that view. I know, a lot of early leaders think they need to know, and myself, when I was a young manager, thought I needed to know all the answers and had to be bulletproof and couldn't show any weakness. But I guess what led you down to this realization that vulnerability is a strength, and how does it show up in the way you operate?
I think very early learnings, as I said, in that organization, I had some, moments like you just mentioned where I thought I knew everything and made some big in my eyes in those days, mistakes, and was in an environment where you're in a small group of people. Those mistakes are, in front of everyone. So it's well known, and you kind of learn to accept it and own up to it in that way. And then I guess fast forwarding now, I think, I've always thought vulnerability was important, but in this year it's been increasingly important. And standing in front of a Zoom with your team all the time saying that everything is perfect and it's not who we should be as leaders. So I make a point of it because if you're not vulnerable, then you set an expectation that people need to be perfect. And if people strive, it's good to strive to be perfect, but if people don't hit that mark, then they feel that they've failed. And with that, failure and guilt becomes a whole load of other issues that can manifest from their personal and professional lives. And I think more than ever, we need a greater focus on, compassion for people. So, if you mess up, you say it. I say it. I will often talk through, we did this and I pushed this forward and it was the wrong way to go. And now we need to go this way. And you kind of, if I was talking back then, I would say you kind of cop it on the chin, but you now would, but now, and that would be in the environment that would work in, but now, we'll kind of say, all right, well, now let's look at how it happened, but focus less on the how and then look at how it won't happen again. Or, what do we learn from it? And I think you can't talk fail fast if you then have a very, approach of putting someone down when they make a mistake, because that's again disingenuous. So it's tolerating mistakes. It's also having a pretty high risk threshold, because you as a leader and the leadership team have also put in the right buffers. I think that's important. You can't just let things go without consequence all the time, but you put buffers in place, and I think that's important. But being vulnerable has always, I think, been important to me, because, you're at work so often. You need to get to know the people that you work with. You need to have some personal connection, I think, in order to work in that environment. And, that tone should be set from a leader. Yeah,
absolutely. Especially, when we talk so much about CX, but EX, is so integral to that, and actually knowing your staff and understanding them and having empathy with them goes a long way. Right, creating the right culture in the team, which then creates the right customer experience as a result of that.
Absolutely.
What have been some of the biggest obstacles you've overcome on your transformation journey? And the flip side to that, what's been some of the greatest results so far?
I think, look, you're going to get this in every interview. One of the biggest obstacles we're overcoming is where we are right now, is trying to manage an exceptional group of people, both staff and students and everyone through this period of time. So that's said from a leader perspective, but also from a marketing and comms perspective. It's a challenge to respond to a press conference, 10 minutes after it's happened to look at the impacts and communicate with everyone. So I think that's been a real challenge. I think it's been a real challenge to, in parallel, we've all talked about having digital strategies. Every CMO has talked about that for a very long time. But when you actually have to deliver everything physically and digital at the same time, or you have planned to deliver, for example, an open day physically, and then it's changed to be digital, and then, you're running two strategies in parallel. And that's no less volume. You have to be smart because you don't have more people, you don't have more hours, and you certainly don't have more money. So you have to manage that. So I think that piece has been a really big challenge. And I think the other piece that's just a challenge with everyone is we have that great planning and alignment function, which is very small in scale, but very big in impact. But people move every year, and organizations shift and change, and new things become priorities in different areas. So keeping that current and keeping us all, aligned in terms of marketing communications is not a challenge that will ever go away. It's a challenge we get better at, but it's again something you need to reinvent every year because it's so pivotal and important. So they're probably the biggest challenge. But the impact piece, I take it back to what we look at, that reputation piece and that communication, engagement, conversion type pieces, is we've been able to see that the strategy, and more this year actually than any other year, is the work that we've put up front for the last 3 years. The impact is really in the metrics, and we've been able to do things within hours that others haven't been able to do in months, and that's not because of anything, but that strategy and that focus, I guess, on the data models and the infrastructure and the planning before we went out with the execution. So now we're seeing launch of functionality that people would say, well, that's a really easy piece of functionality to have on your website to cater content to an audience. It's you may think it's easy, but when there's 84 segments that cross over each other, and that content is then overlaid by 162 different countries or whatever it might be, that actually becomes a lot different. And when those segments are completely different in what their goals are, one wants to study, one is looking from, they're very fundamentally different things. You can click a button on a website and say, I'm this audience member, and change things. That's easy. But when you want to do it automated through data, it's very different. So we're actually seeing that fruitfulness really start to pay off now in not just web and digital ecosystems, but in email marketing and automation, in a whole range of things. And, more complexities open up with that. And, the most important thing, one of the most important things for me is when we talk about data is the ethical and legal use of data. And that's we have a governance area in that area just to make sure that it's, quadruple checked and aligned with all of the different country legislations, but also is ethical. But it's really inspiring to see those pieces happen. And I know a small change that's made at the front end of anything, how much we should celebrate that, because what's going on underneath is a big piece of work in a very complex technology infrastructure. I think those things are impressive. So we celebrate a lot of those. And the other piece is the reputation side. I think we've got Monash University's name in places that people had never seen it or seen it very rarely before. And that's based off of great research and supporting in telling those academic pursuit stories out in the market and around the world. So, those are two really, really big wins. And obviously, you talked about change it before. We're all incredibly proud of that. And, that content stack that sits underneath that, a different lens and what happens next. They're all big pieces that are having big impact. So they're pretty important to us too. So proud of all of those. Most of all, proud of the team that's delivered it, because they've, their ability to take a vision and make that a reality is pretty remarkable.
No, it's very impressive. And I think the progress you've made over those 3 years, like you said, has almost perfectly positioned you for when COVID struck. You've got such a runway on a lot of universities. I think you're kind of obviously one of the leaders in this field to achieve that kind of audience experience and that segmentation and personalization at scale. In a lot of universities now will be kind of starting on that journey due to COVID, but I think it was, I guess, a bit of foresight and having that strategy and executing that over 3 years, and I'm sure you'll continue to bear fruit from that.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that we've certainly not had our being knocked off course by the different outcomes. So there's still the thing with this piece is everyone tries to remove manual work and manual workarounds for sophistication, etc. But having those pieces in place and having that experience of individuals is the buffers you need, particularly in a pandemic. So it's been technologies and personalization and automation has played a role, but it's the people that have really their perseverance to kind of something comes in from the side and changes direction to mobilize and run has been pretty great and graceful, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, Fabian, well, it's time for the Fast Five. Are you ready?
I am.
So what do you believe are 3 essential capabilities or criteria of a high-performance marketing team?
Digital data, but also that creative storytelling is still critical.
Yeah, beautiful. And how do you describe your marketing team's culture in one word?
Willing,
like that. And have you found one metric you've successfully used to kind of track team performance?
We run sentiment, but do it in a way that picks up absolutely everything across every marketing and comms kind of channel being spoken about us from all audience groups. So if we're doing the right thing, then we can pretty much rely on that as a pretty super metric.
And what's one skill or capability you've recently developed that you wish you'd developed earlier in your career?
I think we all keep developing it, but I think it's that resilience. I don't think you know what you're capable of unless you're put in that in that position. And I think that I've probably learned to have even greater resilience than probably before.
Yeah. And lastly, what book or books have you read that you found yourself recommending or you think our audience would find value in?
I'm going to say the thing that you're not supposed to say is I don't do a lot of reading outside of my role, unless it's autobiographical and or stories of, I guess, true stories of real struggle. So again, I come back to that piece is I like a story of where someone has overcome adversity or gone through and reinvention or resilience piece. So, but I'm mostly into the, short form content that I'll read through all of my mainly digital channels, if I'm honest.
Okay, well, that before we wrap up is where should people go to either get in touch with you or learn more about Monash University?
LinkedIn is best for me, and monash.edu is best to learn about Monash. There's certainly a wealth there.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Fabian Marrone.
Thank you. It's been great. Good to see you.
You've been listening to Lean Mean Marketing Teams with Ty Hayes. If you love the show, please remember to hit subscribe so that you can discover more tips and strategies to build a high-performance marketing team. And if you're feeling generous, please tell someone about the show who you think would benefit. We're on a mission to help CMOs build their dream team and enable marketers to do their best work. And we appreciate your help in spreading the word.